Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The planet Viridian shimmered in the distant light of its twin suns, a world of endless green and vibrant life. From orbit, the colonies looked like mere specks against the lush, rolling plains and towering forests. But down on the surface, it was a different story. The human presence on Viridian had grown into a sprawling network of mining outposts, research stations, and bustling markets, all thriving under the invisible web of energy that connected every living thing. Dr. Ethan Rains stood at the edge of one such outpost, staring out at the tangled network of vines and shimmering energy webs that spanned the horizon. He'd been on Viridian for nearly 5 years now, studying the strange phenomena that defied every known law of biology and physics. The energy webs, produced by the planet's native species, the arachnions, were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They connected entire ecosystems, allowing plants and animals to thrive in perfect balance, as if the planet itself were alive, consciously directing the flow of energy. "Ethan, you've been out here for hours. You should come in before the storms hit." Kara's voice crackled over his comm. Ethan turned, blinking as the setting suns cast a golden glow over the landscape. Kara had been his colleague for years, an environmental scientist who shared his fascination with Viridian's delicate ecosystems. But while she was always the voice of caution, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. "Just a few more minutes," Ethan replied, his gaze returning to the shimmering webs in the distance. "There's something different about the webs today. They're pulsing." Kara sighed, her voice softened. "I know you're close to a breakthrough, but it can wait until tomorrow. The Colony Council is meeting, and you know how they feel about delays in mining operations. They're expecting your report." Ethan frowned. The Colony Council, led by the ever-ambitious Saravana, had been pressuring him for months to weaponize the arachnions' webs. They saw the energy network as a potential tool for military and commercial exploitation, and with Viridian's rich resources at stake, they weren't about to let an alien ecosystem stand in their way. "I'll be there," Ethan muttered, turning to leave. "I just need a little more time." As he made his way back toward the outpost, the air around him hummed with the planet's energy. He could feel the webs beneath his feet, like a living network pulsing with life. He had spent years studying them, trying to understand how the arachnids, strange, spider-like creatures with bioluminescent bodies, produced and maintained the webs. Yet, despite all their research, there was still so much they didn't know. Ethan stopped, his heart pounding as he caught sight of something unusual. A few yards away, tangled in one of the webs, was a large, injured arachnion. Its body flickered with weak pulses of light, and its long, slender legs twitched as it struggled to free itself from the web. Without thinking, Ethan rushed toward the creature. He had seen arachnions up close before, but never one in this condition. As he reached out to touch the web, a surge of energy shot through his body, sending a wave of pain coursing through his veins. He gasped, stumbling backward as his vision blurred. The arachnion let out a low, guttural sound, and Ethan's mind was flooded with images of alien landscapes, intricate webs, and a deep, primal connection to the planet itself. He could feel the creature's pain, its desperation, as if their minds had become one. "Ethan, what's going on out there?" Kara's voice sounded distant, muffled by the roaring storm that was beginning to build on the horizon. Ethan tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His body felt heavy, his limbs numb as the energy from the web continued to pulse through him. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the connection was severed. The arachnion went limp, its body falling still as the last of its light faded. Ethan collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. His heart raced as he struggled to make sense of what had just happened. His mind buzzed with the lingering remnants of the connection, and he could still feel the faint hum of the web beneath his skin. He had fused with the arachnid's energy, its genetic material somehow merging with his own. The realization hit him like a freight train. He wasn't just a scientist studying the webs anymore. He was part of them, By the time Kara arrived, the storm was in full swing, lightning crackling across the darkening sky. She found Ethan lying on the ground, his face pale, his body shaking as the energy coursed through him. "Ethan, what happened?" She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. "We need to get you inside." Ethan opened his eyes, the faint glow of the webs reflected in his irises. I touched it." The web. The arachnid. Something changed. Kara's expression shifted from concern to shock as she noticed the faint web-like patterns beginning to form on Ethan's skin. They were barely visible, but there, nonetheless, an intricate network of lines that seemed to pulse with energy. "Stay with me," Kara whispered, her voice tight with fear as she helped him to his feet. "We need to get you back to the lab." As they stumbled through the storm, Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the web inside him now, connecting him to the planet in ways he never thought possible. The arachnids had always been a mystery, but now, they were part of him. He was no longer just a mana, he was something more. But as the storm raged on, Ethan knew that his newfound connection to Viridian wouldn't remain a secret for long. The Colony Council had been watching his every move, and with Teravos breathing down his neck, it was only a matter of time before they tried to exploit his new abilities for their own gain. Ethan woke to the steady beeping of medical equipment and the soft hum of the lab's ventilation system. The pain had subsided, replaced by a dull ache that spread through his limbs, as if every cell in his body had been rearranged overnight. Kara hovered nearby, her eyes filled with worry. "You're awake," she said softly, stepping forward. "How do you feel?" Ethan sat up slowly, blinking as the faint traces of web-like patterns shimmered across his skin, barely visible under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Like I've been hit by a truck," he muttered, rubbing his head. "But it's more than that. Something's different." Kara nodded. "You've been out for nearly 2 days. Whatever happened when you touched that arachnid? It's changed you, Ethan. The scans show traces of their genetic material in your system. You're not fully human anymore." Ethan stared at her, his mind reeling. It wasn't just the shock of the transformation, it was the implications. He could feel the energy webs inside him, a faint hum beneath his skin, like the planet's heartbeat pulsing in sync with his own. He was connected to Viridian now, in ways he didn't fully understand, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a scientist observing from the outside. He was part of this planet. "We need to keep this quiet," Ethan said, his voice low. "If the Colony Council finds out." "They already know," Kara interrupted, her expression grim. "Teravos sent her people to check on you while you were unconscious. She's been asking questions, and it's only a matter of time before she makes a move." Ethan cursed under his breath. Voss had always been a thorn in his side, pushing for faster results, more resources, more control. But now that he had this power, this connection to the arachnid, he knew she wouldn't stop until she had it for herself. "We have to get ahead of this," Ethan said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "I need to figure out how to control these powers, how to use them to protect the planet before Voss turns this into a war." Kara helped him stand, her eyes scanning his face for any signs of weakness. "You're not doing this alone," she said firmly. "We'll figure it out together. But you need to be careful, Ethan. We don't know what the full extent of this transformation is." Ethan nodded, but his mind was already racing. He could feel the webs calling to him, like a distant melody he couldn't quite hear, but that pulled him nonetheless. The arachnids had built this network, connecting the entire planet, and now he was a part of it. But the question remained, could he control it, or would it control him? By the time Ethan and Kara reached the lab's control center, the situation had already escalated. The main display showed a live feed of the colony's mining operations, with several key sites glowing red as warning alarms flashed across the screen. "They've ramped up the mining," Kara said, her voice tight. "They're drilling deeper into Viridian's core, destabilizing the energy webs. If they keep this up, It's only a matter of time before the entire system collapses. Ethan felt a surge of anger rise within him. The colony was tearing the planet apart. And for what? Resources? Profit? He could feel the damage being done, the delicate balance of the ecosystem unraveling with every drill that pierced the surface. We need to stop them, Ethan said, his voice hard. If the webs collapse, the planet will tear itself apart. I won't let that happen. Before Kara could respond, the door to the control center slid open, and Sarah Voss strode in, flanked by two armed guards. Her sharp eyes flicked between Ethan and Kara, her lips curling into a cold smile. Dr. Rains, she said, her voice oozing false pleasantries. It's good to see you up and about. I've been hearing some interesting things about your condition. Ethan stood his ground, the energy webs humming beneath his skin. He could feel the pull of the planet, the connection to the arachnions, and with it, a growing sense of power. This planet is on the verge of collapse because of your greed, he said, his voice steady. If you don't stop the mining operations, there won't be anything left to exploit. Voss raised an eyebrow, her smile never wavering. You're in no position to make demands, Dr. Rains. The colony's survival depends on these resources, and I intend to secure them, by any means necessary. Ethan clenched his fists, the energy web responding to his anger. He could feel the threads of the planet reaching out to him, waiting for his command. If you don't stop, I will. Voss's smile faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough to show that she understood the threat. She glanced at her guards, then back at Ethan. I see you've become quite attached to the planet. But let me remind you, Dr. Rains, that this colony is under my control. If you think you can stand in my way, you're sorely mistaken. Ethan took a step forward, the air around him crackling with energy. He could feel the webs stretching out across the planet, every thread connected, every pulse of life flowing through him. He wasn't just a man anymore, he was part of Viridian, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. You're wrong, Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. This planet doesn't belong to you, and neither do I. With a surge of power, Ethan reached out to the energy webs, sending a pulse through the network. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the lights flickered as the planet responded to his call. Voss's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, Ethan saw fear flicker across her face. What have you done? She whispered. I'm stopping you, Ethan replied, his voice calm. You won't destroy this planet. Not while I'm still standing. The ground continued to shake, and alarms blared as the mining operations were forcibly shut down. Ethan could feel the energy webs weaving through him, strengthening with every passing moment. He was connected to Viridian in ways he hadn't fully understood before, but now, he knew. The planet was alive, and he was its protector. Voss stepped back, her face pale. You're making a mistake, Rains. You can't fight this. The colony needs those resources. No, Ethan said, his voice firm. The colony needs this planet to survive. If you keep pushing, you'll destroy everything. For a long moment, Voss said nothing, her gaze locked on Ethan. Then, with a sharp nod, she turned and left the control center, her guards following close behind. Kara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That was intense. Ethan turned to her, the energy web still humming beneath his skin. It's not over yet. Voss won't give up that easily. We need to prepare. Kara nodded, her expression resolute. What's the plan? We stop the mining for good, Ethan said. But we're going to need help. There are others in the colony who want to protect Viridian. It's time we bring them together. The following days were a blur of activity. Ethan and Kara worked tirelessly to gather a group of rebel scientists, workers, and colonists who shared their vision of protecting Viridian from corporate greed. They met in secret, plotting ways to sabotage the mining operations and keep the planet's delicate ecosystems intact. As the web's influence over Ethan grew stronger, so did his powers. He could now weave energy webs with ease, connecting himself to the planet's core, tapping into the natural energy that flowed through Viridian. With each passing day, he felt less human, but more in tune with the planet he had come to love. But Voss was not idle. She knew Ethan was a threat to her plans, and she began amassing her own forces, hiring mercenaries and using the colony's security forces to crack down on the growing rebellion. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. Voss launched a full-scale assault on the rebel camp, sending waves of soldiers and drones to eliminate Ethan and his followers once and for all. Ethan stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the first wave of attackers approached. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the energy web pulsing beneath his skin, ready to be unleashed. "This is it," Kara said, standing beside him. "Are you ready?" Ethan nodded, his eyes glowing with the faint light of the webs. "I am." With a single thought, he reached out to the planet, calling on its power. The ground trembled, and massive energy webs sprang to life, wrapping around the advancing soldiers, trapping them in a shimmering prison of light. Voss watched from a distance, her face twisted with fury as her forces were overwhelmed by the planet itself. "You can't win, Reigns!" she shouted over the din of battle. "You're one man. You can't fight the colony." Ethan turned to face her, his voice calm, but filled with unshakable resolve. "I'm not just a man anymore, Voss. I'm part of this planet, and it's time you learn to respect it." With a final surge of power, Ethan sent a pulse through the webs, causing the ground beneath Voss's feet to split open. She stumbled, her eyes wide with terror as the planet itself rose up against her. Ethan felt the planet's energy flow through him, the webs pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He was more than just a protector now, he was Viridian's guardian, and as long as he stood, the planet would survive. The battle raged on, but in the end, it was clear who had won. Voss's forces were no match for the power of Viridian, and one by one, they were forced to retreat. As the dust settled, Ethan stood at the center of the battlefield, his body glowing with the light of the webs. Kara approached him cautiously, her eyes filled with awe. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved the planet." Ethan smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I saved it for now. But the fight isn't over. There will always be people like Voss, who see this planet as a resource to be exploited." Kara nodded. "Then we'll keep fighting together." Ethan looked out at the horizon, the twin suns setting over the lush landscape. He could feel the planet's energy coursing through him, a constant reminder of his connection to Viridian. He had become something more than human, but he hadn't lost himself. Not yet. And as long as there was breath in his body, he would protect this world.